Hello, World Wide Web. Welcome back to the Hangin with Web show. I'm GW Pomichter. Thank you so much for logging on or tuning in, for clicking on a link somewhere on social media. However you got here, welcome to the seedy part of town. We are at Indie Bookfest 2019 in Orlando, Florida. We're hanging out with Jennifer Siddoway, the author of the Pirates of Barra series.
That is true.
All right, and this is book one. We have book one, which is Taken by Graham.
That is true, yes.
Okay.
So the Pirates of Barra, it's really interesting how I came up with the concept for this series. I knew I wanted to write a pirate series, and I knew there were Scottish pirates. I didn't know much more than that. So when I started writing, I had the idea in my head to do this, traditional pirate ship with, below quarters, the captain's quarters, the steering wheel, all of that. And the more I researched, I found out that these weren't so much Caribbean-style pirates. These were more like Vikings. Mm-hmm. They had wives and children and families, and so they would go on raids, and then they would come back home and they would live their lives like a normal family. Okay. It was an interesting dynamic, and I had a lot of fun researching them and finding out more about Clan MacNeil.
That's a lot of fun. What's great is, like you said, you dove into what was, in your mind, the classic pirate tale. Mm-hmm. And because you chose to set it in, with Scottish pirates,
Scotland.
You got a whole education. Your research just flipped the script on everything that you thought you knew about pirates.
I should have known that was going to happen. I'm such a history nerd.
That's awesome.
I love research. I love finding out things that I don't already know. Mm-hmm. And I love researching genealogy, history. I do medieval reenactment in my spare time.
Awesome.
So this was right up my alley. And Clan MacNeil they're considered the last of the Vikings. They blood tests and a whole bunch of science has proven that they are genetically from Sweden. They're not from Scotland. They're
proper.
Actually the last of the Vikings.
Wow. Well, and a lot of people don't realize this. Well, they might realize this in recent years with the popularity of pirates and Vikings combined, that there was a lot of that on the whole of the UK, from Scotland down to England. The Vikings had a major influence once they reached the island. Absolutely. They had a major influence on the cultural development of the island.
Yeah, especially with the Danelaw, when once they hit the mainland, there was no going back. It completely changed the culture.
And we tend to. One of the things I think we talk about, especially in a lot of literature, is as various cultures branch out, we do tend to assimilate a lot, and so we assimilate sometimes by force, sometimes just by pure longevity. The longer one culture exists within another, the more impact it will have on the development of the other.
I agree with that. I agree with that completely.
So, okay, so let's get into your clan here. Okay.
Sure, Clan MacNeil.
Clan MacNeil. In your research, you found out that they were descendant from the Vikings that came over to Scotland, and you obviously did a lot of research on their development.
Yes.
Probably everything from tartan colors to seamanship. So tell us a little bit. What did you learn? What was the most surprising thing that you learned?
Okay, so the Barra, this is the Pirates of Barra. The Barra is actually this tiny little island in the Western Hebrides. It's at the very southern tip of the Hebridean archipelago, the collection of islands. Okay. And the ancestral seat of their clan is Castle Kizimul. And in Gaelic... Kizimul. And
say that 3 times fast, just for fun. We just want you to do it. We can't hear you, but we're hoping that you'll try it, Okay, so she did it.
In Gaelic, it means Castle Island. And the reason they call...
They're very creative, those Scottish. Castle Island, there's a castle on an island. Do the math.
But at the base, the island is shaped like a C, and in the center of the bay is an outcropping of rocks. Okay. And that's where they built this castle. It has never been successfully sieged because it is completely surrounded by water. It's a kind of tiny castle, so you can only access it by boat. But it's also in this outcropping of rocks, so unless you've got a tiny...
It's kind of a perfect pirate lair, by the way.
It's a perfect pirate lair, absolutely. But Kizimul is basically what the main hub of where these pirates would locate. Their clan motto was conquer or die. I think they were better at dying than conquering because they never got to be a very big clan. But that is Bohanid Beras is what it's.
What does that say again?
Budas
I love
Nibas.
that she pronounces them, and she does it like with such ease and flair that I'm like, what?
Yeah, so conquer or die. And they did have clan colors. You didn't wear a kilt until around the 1600s, like the way we understand
the way
a
we
kilt.
understand, yeah.
That's later period. But they did have the tartan, which was blue and green with a pinstripe of yellow.
Awesome.
So personally, as a redhead, I like blue and green. So when you go to my signing table, you'll see me with a little Clan McNeil scarf.
Very
wearing.
cool. Very cool.
But they're really interesting. I didn't think that I was up to the task. I was totally thrown for a loop when I realized they weren't what I first thought, and then I just grew to love them. I really became fascinated with this scrappy group of sailors and the concept of how they lived their lives. So what would happen is the Barra is this island, it's very rocky, they didn't have a lot of farmland, and so they would have to raid passing ships.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they kind of had this agreement with other Scottish clans. They didn't want to raid from other Scotsmen. So they traveled south and they would raid the English vessels and the Spanish vessels.
As one would.
And they would take back swords and they would take back gold and they would take back lumber.
By the way, for that period in history, that's pretty ballsy.
It is.
Because the English Navy is growing at that time. It's becoming what it will be 150 years later, which is the best Navy in the world. But if you're not scared to mess with them as they grow, you should be scared of the Spanish, because that at the time is the premier Navy on the planet.
It absolutely is. And they make the best steel. Like Spanish steel was highly valuable. It was lighter, it was harder, it lasted longer. It was the best weapons. They had the best swordsmiths on the planet at that time.
And the ships were
huge.
Yes. I mean, they
were huge.
Even 100 years later, when the British are becoming the premier Navy, they are still looking back to the Spanish ship designs at, wow, can we do that?
Yeah.
Big and heavy and still fast. And so the fact that these guys are like scrappy enough to say, look, we're essentially Vikings, you know, in terms of technology, and, you know, which are fast ships, they're excellent for both shallow and deep water.
Right.
But in a fight, the last thing you want in your tiny Viking ship is to go up against a Spanish galleon.
Exactly.
And these guys were willing to go down and say, let's go.
Right, you had English warships, you had Scottish, like, huge ships, and these guys were basically in longboats. Like, they were not defensible against cannon fire.
You know, fast, good ship for trade.
Yep.
Great ship for inland siege, because you can go up a river from the ocean to the river. But like I said, one-on-one against a Spanish armada or a British thing, the best thing you've got going for yourself is hit them and run away really fast.
Yeah, so they wouldn't...
It's like the Flash. I push people and then run really fast.
Yeah, they wouldn't go out alone. They would go in fleets of like 10
that would make
ships.
sense, yeah.
And each ship would have about 40 sailors. This is, it's kind of a traditional romance. The story starts with this pirate captain arriving at Elsmith McDougall's door, and he's come to collect a gambling debt, which her father owes, which is about 300 gold pieces, which is a small fortune. And they're not a wealthy family, but they strike a deal because she has a very specific set of skills. She's a surgeon. She's very good with stitching people up and putting them back together. And so if she is willing to go with him on raids and basically live as a pirate for 3 months, he'll forgive the debt. But so he takes her with him, and he takes her back to their village, which is Castle Bay Village, which is that little village that surrounds Kizamul. And she stays at the tavern, and she just gets to know the people. She understands why they are the way they are. She understands they don't kill unless they have to, and that they really are about honor. And she and Graham start to fall in love, and she decides to stay and live as a pirate.
Well, and I love that she gets kind of that lesson in cultural understanding, because
Exactly.
it's something that we often forget. We look back at even the golden age of piracy, and we see that swashbuckling rogue. And in
Right.
truth, in a world that is governed at the time by a very strict social dynamic, oftentimes when you really dive in to see who these people were, they were just people who wanted to live the way we take for granted living every day.
Exactly. There are
They
people
lived
frustrated with the status quo.
They lived in a feudal society. There was no room for growth. There was no room for personal wealth. There was no room for those things. So the only way to experience that level of freedom was to go as far away from the mainstay as
Exactly.
possible, whether it was the English and the Dutch and the Spanish in the Caribbean, or the Scottish where they were. Get away from the castles and the noblemen and the lords and make your own life. And for a sea
Exactly.
captain, the best of the thing in the world is being on your ship. That is your dominion.
That's what a ship is. It's freedom.
It is.
It's freedom to travel, and it's authority.
And so over one's own life, if nothing else. You know, that small gaggle of 20 or 30 guys and their families is relying on you as the captain. And that's freedom, and it's power, and it's you know.
Now, it's interesting because we talk about the captains, and we usually think of them as like the end-all be-all on the ship. Their word is law. But a captain doesn't have as much power as you'd think, because he will always have a quartermaster.
And he'll always be elected.
And he'll always be elected.
In the pirate community.
A quartermaster is somebody who negotiates between the captain and the crew. And he tells the captain when they're being overbearing and when they're asking too much of these men, and he's the one who whips the crew into shape when they're slacking off. So the quartermaster has to toe a very careful line, and they have to be charismatic.
In that merchant community, that's incredibly important.
Incredibly.
Because in the naval community, where the captains, they are the last word. They are God on their ship.
Yep.
And as a result of that, though, you see more and more in the structured naval community, the big epic tales are the mutineers' tales.
Yeah.
Because in a structured community like that, your only recourse is to seize the ship.
Yep.
In the pirate community or the merchant community, where the captains are elected and they have a quartermaster and the men have a say, that democratization you have less mutinies. Pirates aren't mutineers by definition.
Right.
They will go to the quartermaster. They will elect a new captain. It's a democratized way of running your ship, which is an amazing thing to see.
They have greater respect for each other and an understanding between the captain and the crew.
And again, upward mobility, freedom, as you said before.
Exactly.
Because I can start as a boatswain's mate and become captain over a career. That's not something you can do in the British Navy or the Spanish Navy or even later on in the American Navy. You just can't. You are limited to your class.
Right.
And in the pirate or the merchant community, you're not. You can grow. If you can become a better seaman, a better captain, a better leader, a more charismatic person, you can grow, which is an awesome demonstration of personal freedom and responsibility.
Right. And in the case of these particular pirates, when they went on these raids, they would come back with treasure, but then it was given to the laird, the lord of the clan, and he would distribute it how he saw fit.
Okay.
So you didn't get to keep what you collected on your raid necessarily. It was pretty socialist in that regard.
Okay, so it got kind of distributed among the...
It got distributed because he knew who needed swords. He knew who needed land to build new homes. He knew where that needed to be allocated better than anyone else. And so it would serve the community better. And it was about the community, not about the individual.
That is pretty awesome. It's a lot of fun doing the research for this. This is book one. Book
This
two
is book one. Book two is Rescued by Valan.
Okay.
And it's a new young ingenue where he has just been elected as a captain, and he wants to make a name for himself. And he might have bitten off more than he can chew. So.
Usually happens. How many books are in the series total?
4. There will be 4.
There will be 4. Outstanding. Guys, we have to wrap it up here. We've been hanging out with Jennifer Siddoway, the author of the Pirates of Barra series. Check it out. We're going to put links down below. In the meantime, we want to thank our friends Famous Faces and Funnies, Space Coast Comics, Indie Originals, J. Bauer Art, Foxwood Wine Company, and Hearts Helping Others of Central Florida, as well as our great friends at Krypton Radio, Gene Turnbow and his crew over there. Thank you for tuning in and logging on. Hit subscribe, come back, log on, tune in, and see who we're hanging with next. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. We could have just kept talking because that